What's the difference between a quilter who finishes quilts and one who starts dozens but only actually gets a few to the finish line? It's not talent, it's not fancy equipment, and honestly, it's not even time. My student Anna discovered this when we worked together, and she went, in her words, from feeling scared of her quilting machine in the corner to completing 43 quilts in 7 months. You heard that right, 43 finished quilts. This was not over a period of years, but just a period of months. And it all started with one simple shift in Anna's thinking. I want to chat about this student story with you today because I think that it's apt to resonate for many of you. And I've been in this same spot too, where I have a certain amount of skill or a certain amount of knowledge, and I know I want to do greater things. And maybe, as was Anna's story, I've already acquired a better, bigger machine, but I'm paralyzed because of the things that I don't know. And I suspect this may be true for some of you. You've got this increasing pile of things that you've sewed, quilts that you've already done the patchwork and the piecing. You've got this idea of who you want to give it to or who it's going to be for, or it's the perfect color for your living room, but you just don't know how to get that quilt to the finish line. So I share with you Anna's story because ultimately it's one of hope. And also it really illustrates for me, it's dear to my heart, it illustrates for me why I teach quilting. I consider it my mission to encourage quilters to start wherever they're at and that they can learn the things they need to learn, and it's just not that hard to get their quilts finished. So this idea of encouragement and learning and grasping the skills that we need and walking alongside you to help you make the decisions you need to make, that is so fulfilling to me, and Anna just encapsulates this story beautifully. Anna was not able to be here with me for the recording, and I'm sorry about that. But what we did do is email back and forth. And I asked Anna a few questions, and she gave me lots of information in her answers. So I'm going to kind of read the interview to you and share it with you. And I'll put some of it on the screen as well so that you're able to read some of these detailed answers too and follow along with the story. So let's get started. My first question for Anna was how much quilting she had done before she took a class from me. Now, I should take just a second and clarify. The class that Anna took from me, I call Free Motion Quilting Masterclass. And this assumes a certain amount of quilting knowledge on the part of the student. It's all about building a repertoire of increasingly difficult and interesting free motion quilting designs. But this episode is not about that class. I just wanted to give you some framework for what it is that Anna and I are talking about, okay? So Anna says, my quilting experience has been sporadic. I sewed mainly garments and household items, with quilts making their appearance for special occasions, like the birth of my 3 sons, a random baby shower, and my in-laws and parents' 25th wedding anniversary. So maybe 10 quilts over the span of 40 years. It wasn't until retirement started looming that I decided I needed to replace the loss of my work friends with other friends, and that's when I joined a local quilt guild, Ohio Valley Quilters Guild. And about that time, I decided that the UFO quilt for a dear friend's 50th birthday should probably be finished before she turned 65. Haven't we all been there? That endeavor, quilting a king-sized quilt using a domestic sewing machine and walking foot, made me realize that my now 65-year-old shoulders could not manage the weight of that kind of quilting. So I want to insert a few thoughts here. Each of us comes into quilting at our own different places, our own age, our own stitching ability, our own pile of quilt tops, whatever that may be. And Anna had gotten used to quilting them at her sewing machine, which is a great starting point. But what she's finding is that action of needing to wrangle a large quilt at the domestic sewing machine was too hard on her shoulders. So this is nudging Anna into a decision about a different machine. My story was a little bit different. I was quite a bit younger. I still had that flexibility, if you will, or that strength at my sit-down sewing machine. Mine was all about speed. I wanted to make more quilts and make them faster, so that's what nudged me into a bigger and faster machine. But each of us has our own journey. You may be perfectly content to continue making baby quilts and lap size quilts, and that's all good. Each of us has that journey of our own. But let's get back to Anna's story. It took about 6 months of deliberation and a 4-hour practice run on a Handy Quilter Moxie. Now, Handy Quilter is a brand of long arm machine, and Moxie is a particular model, like a Ford Tempo, a Handy Quilter Moxie. At my local quilt shop, before I gladly handed over my credit card. The shop had their techs set up the machine and Pro Stitcher Light in my home, and the owner gave me my first lesson. Okay, another insertion here. Pro Stitcher Light is Handy Quilter's branded and trademarked computerized quilting system. So in other words, you can give a digitally created pattern to the machine and it will cause the stitching to happen on the fabric. Now, the driver, the operator of the machine still needs to do a lot of work in terms of organizing it in the quilting space and maybe sizing it larger or smaller and making repeats match. So it's not just the push of a single button, but it is a computerized drive belt system that would operate that machine, okay? So that's what the Pro Stitcher Light is about. The owner gave me my first lesson. Oh, I was so empowered until I wasn't, and suddenly nothing made sense. And I was feeling the quilting pressure as I had already committed to one of the guild committees, Kids Comfort Quilts for children facing stressful situations, where the volunteers can either cut or piece or quilt or bind or choose to do it all. I had chosen the quilting portion since piecing is not my strong suit. I struggled mightily with the Pro Stitcher Light software, right? Doing all those things I was talking about, managing the spacing and the repeats and the connections and all those things. And after spending about 4 hours quilting and the program just stopped with a 3-inch strip left, I turned off the tablet, the operating system, right? And just finished it with free motion. Now, here's another definition for you. Free motion quilting is when you, the quilter, are entirely in charge of where every stitch is placed. So if you're working at a domestic sewing machine, it might mean you're moving the fabric under the needle. If you're working at a long arm, as Anna is, it means you're grabbing the handlebars and you're literally doodling. You're guiding every single stitch. So that's what Anna did. She turned off that computerized system and she finished it with free motion. And then, Anna says, something magical happened. I was hooked, stitched. I went looking for online instruction because a sewing machine trolley for a long arm would involve backup beepers and nobody wants that noise following you around. It wasn't too long before I found Stitched by Susan. Anna has found something that she loves now, right? She's hooked on this idea of free motion quilting, of guiding the machine for herself. And this, I think, is another pivotal point in Anna's journey, is that she recognized what it was that she loved to do. And I'll keep the details for another episode, but I'll just say lightly here, I always recommend doing some quilting, several quilts, before you invest in a high-ticket purchase to figure out what it is that you love doing before you decide door A, door B, or door C. Because Anna has now invested in a computerized system, but in fact finds it's the free motion, the entirely artist-controlled motion that she actually loves. I then asked her what other methods of learning she had tried, and I suggested trial and error and YouTube University. Many of us have been there for our learning, right? But here's what Anna replied. When Handy Quilter came to Cincinnati via a local quilt shop, I took the multi-day class with a group of about 20 other quilters, all there for varying reasons, from downsizing from a larger machine, but wanting to try before I buy it, determining if Pro Stitcher is worth the extra money, and tired of being scared of that machine in my sewing room. The class was good, the instructor excellent, and I spent a bunch of money on gadgets for the machine. The downside was we had to double up on the HQ machine, so there was always the pressure to hurry up and finish the lesson so my machine mate could have her turn. Okay, let me paint the picture a little bit for you in case you've never been to an in-person class like this. They're lovely because they're in person and you have an instructor who shows you things in real time and you can ask questions and interact with. But because long arm quilting machines are by nature large and take a lot of space, the instructors or the representatives usually are limited in how many they can bring. They can't bring 20 to a class size of this 20, right? That would take a football field. And so what happens then is they assign 2 women, or however many, but more than one, to each machine, and you each get a turn using it. And sometimes on the long arm frame or rails, there are two machines. So then you've got 4 women that are kind of sharing that space and sharing that time a little bit. So yes, it is in person, which is lovely, but there are limitations to it as well. And it goes on. I also watched a lot, capital letters, of YouTube videos. They're mesmerizing when it comes to FMQ, free motion quilting. I could turn them on and just spend the whole day in my recliner. But that's also the downside with YouTube videos. I needed something that gave specific instructions to do, like, do I watch the needle or where the needle is going? How to hold my hands, how to manage my feet, how to ease my aching back. And the videos of the stitching part were never long enough. They usually show the pretty stitching part, but just for a few seconds, but not how to resolve the thread nest if you forget to pull up that pesky bobbin thread, and the need to be a bit ambidextrous when it comes to stitching left to right or right to left, or any other issue that seems monumental when you're alone. Anna has just hit on a big, big key, which is when you're at home quilting by yourself, these things seem monumental. Choices like, Anna's mentioned a whole bunch of them, but here's more. Choices like, what do I do when my quilt's got a whole bunch of colors? What color of thread do I choose then? What looks good on that quilt? Or what do I do if my thread breaks right in the middle of the quilt? Am I able to restart right there? How do I secure those ends? Or do I have to undo to the edge of the quilt? Do you see what I'm saying? So many questions, and they do feel monumental. Gosh, I can still remember when I first got my initial used long arm. I didn't know anybody else that had one. There were very few YouTube videos even available, and these decisions did feel absolutely monumental and overwhelming. I asked her next, though, a few details about who she makes quilts for. In other words, her why of finishing quilts. And Anna answered that I mostly free motion quilt charity quilts. I'm learning to become a better piecer. That's the sewing of the patchwork part, right? But honestly, I found a friend in the guild that hates quilting as much as I hate piecing. So I quilt her quilts and she pieces mine. Win-win. And boy, I agree. If that's something that's holding you up and you can find someone to swap jobs with that you don't care for, that is indeed a win-win situation. Anna goes on, I'm getting better with piecing and I've been working on techniques that are important to quilting, like accurate cutting and that 1/4 inch seam and pressing and binding, and the list goes on. And while I admire those quilt show quilts, the fancy ones, I don't ever expect to make something like that. I'll work on my charity quilts and the ones I make for my family and friends. Anna's hit on something else that I think is a thread that runs through the quilting community, which is enormous, bottomless generosity. I know so many quilters, and for many of them, their reason for quilting is not to make the fanciest, the most elaborate quilt to hang in a quilt show. Their reason is to make quilts that will be used and loved. Quilts for their kids, quilts for anniversary celebrations, maybe even quilts for wall hanging and for art, but very personal, very individual, and so often given away. Quilters are so, so generous. And this is Anna's reason for wanting to do machine quilting, to be able to finish more quilts. I asked Anna what it means to have this skill at the ready. In other words, to know how to make these decisions, to know how to manage the machine, to know how to do the things, batting thread, etc., and just get down and get the quilt done. What does it mean to have that skill at your fingertips? Anna says, I'm very proud of the confidence I've gained with the Stitched by Susan classes. Thank you, Anna. I love that. I even volunteered to do the quilting for my guild's Quilt of Valor committee. Now, Quilt of Valor is another charitable organization that makes quilts for veterans. And again, often one person will cut them, another person will piece them, another person will quilt them, another person will bind. So they're very much a community effort. So Anna has offered to do the quilting for one of these projects. I was so very nervous when I took that flimsy or unquilted top home. At least 2 other people had worked on that full-size top with cutting and piecing, and here I was thinking my quilting was going to be good enough to honor this recipient. What was I thinking? And when I returned it to the Quilt of Valor committee, my stomach was in knots. Was it good enough? Rarely do volunteers receive feedback, good or constructive, because no one wants to discourage a volunteer. But at the next monthly guild meeting, as I was wandering around the committee tables wearing my guild name tag, someone came up to me and exclaimed, "You're Anna? I just finished the binding of the QOV you quilted. Your stitching was perfect. Such a great job." I was embarrassed by her gushing, but oh so proud of myself. That happened a year ago, and I'm still smiling about it. And lastly, I asked Anna if she had any other things, any thoughts that would inspire a student who want to quilt their own project and who are thinking about investing in learning the skill. Anna says, Handy Quilter's tagline for the Moxie is "Own every stitch." I love this. And while I don't do every stitch in any of the quilts I do, I love every stitch I do. Isn't that wonderful? I was so encouraged, and I hope you are too, by Anna's story, because it's such a real world illustration of being at a certain point in a quilting journey and feeling stalled, feeling stuck. So in Anna's case, she's already determined she wants a long arm quilting machine. She wants that size. She wants to take the effort off of her shoulders. She's got one. But now what? Now she's paralyzed by the decisions, by the choices, and where does she go to get that knowledge? So I want this ultimately to be encouraging for you. There are others who have traveled this journey before you. Quilters are generous and want to share their knowledge. So we mentioned some various places of learning, in-person classes, YouTube University, and so forth. But I also want to share that I've created a course just for quilters like you, and I call it Machine Quilting for Beginners because it is the brass tacks of some of these paralyzing decisions. It's things like, okay, I've got a quilt top and a backing, and how do I assess whether they're the right size, whether it's got challenges like a wavy border or it's not square? And then how do I choose batting, like weight or type of fiber? And how do I choose thread, color, thread weight, thread type, all those choices, needles? And then how do I baste it and get it ready for quilting at my domestic machine or load it on a long arm? And all those things, it goes on. But I call this literally the brass tacks of quilting. This takes the mystery out of what to do next and how to do it and how to make those decisions. I so would love to be your coach and mentor as you step forward into finishing your quilts. And gosh, I'd love to hear your story if you too can complete 43 quilts in 7 months.